Alhamdulillah, I want to talk, inshallah, about just a few things. One of them is the purpose of human beings, which is a metaphysical question. And then I also want to talk about how we're doing as human beings. And then finally, I want to talk about what perhaps we should be doing as human beings. The first question is, what is the purpose of human beings? Unfortunately, for the first time in human history, there are civilizations that do not really have any answer whatsoever to this question. This is actually unique in human history, because human beings have always had some reason for existence, whereas the current dominant model in the Western civilization is really untenable metaphysically, because the argument that you will find amongst Western people is essentially what they would call, in their term, an existentialist problem. In other words, that each person has to work out what the meaning of his life is for him or herself. That nobody's going to tell you what your life means. You simply have to work it out for yourself. And this is why suicide is actually a very serious option in that culture. We recently had, in the country I'm from, we had a very famous person commit suicide, and there were actually articles arguing that this was his choice and people should be allowed to have this choice. And you can't refute that argument unless you have a metaphysical argument to counter that argument. Camus is a good example in the West. He was a French-Algerian philosopher. He's famous for a book called The Plague, The Myth of Sisyphus also. But he also eventually committed suicide. And so in essence, the philosophy, the dominant philosophy that is in many, many parts of the world is actually a philosophy of nihilism. It's a philosophy of what the Arabs would term adamiyya, that there's really no purpose to existence. If we look at our tradition, most people, if you ask them, why are we here? Most Muslims would say, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. We only created humans and the spirit world for ibadah. And they would actually believe that this was essentially the purpose of our existence, is ibadah. But there are other reasons that our scholars gave from the Quran for human existence. Because if somebody was not a conscious worshipper, then that would mean essentially that their purpose would be null and void. And this would mean that people outside of the faith, whatever the true faith would be at the time, at one time it was the way of Moses, at another time the way of Jesus, at another time perhaps the way of Buddha, if he was a prophet, as some have argued. We have no absolute evidence, but there are some that have made that argument in the past. Isfarayini is one of them. But if the final way, the prophetic way, is the way of the Prophet Muhammad, then his way actually describes different reasons for the creation of human beings. In the Quran, one of them is isti'mar, that Allah created us from the earth, and then ista'markum fiha, that He gave you isti'mar in the earth. And what that means is He asks that you do umran, that you actually build and cultivate the earth. This is called umran. And the Prophet ﷺ, he came as a prophet of the city, first and foremost. He's a prophet also of the Bedouin, he's a prophet of the farmers, but first and foremost, he is a prophet of Al-Medina, the city. And the reason for that is because the last phase of human existence would be an urban phase, that people all over the world have increasingly flocked to cities. And the city is, it's an ancient concept, but the modern city is a very new concept. The idea of a megapolis, this massive city which allows for anonymity, it allows for people to do things that they would not normally do if they were in a small village where everybody knows who they are. So if you look now, the Prophet ﷺ came to a city, Al-Medina, and he taught people how to live and behave within that context, and then he also taught the Bedouin how to live and behave. So one of the reasons is istimar, is actually to cultivate the earth through umran, which is the term that Ibn Khaldun in his great work Al-Muqaddimah uses for civilization. One of the signs of the end of time is the Prophet ﷺ said there would be kharabul umran wa umran al-kharab, the destruction of civilization and the civilization of destruction. The civilization of destruction. In other words, a nihilistic civilization that tears down to build up. This is called the Hegelian dialectic. A tadmir li ta'mir. Destroy and tear down to rebuild, to build up. And this is one of the phenomena that we see around the world. Wars come in, they destroy everything, and then people make a lot of money rebuilding those places. The real umran is cultivation. The Prophet ﷺ was not a revolutionary in that sense of the word, that he turned everything upside down. So this is, istimar is very important. This is why anybody that is cultivating the earth, that's doing something beneficial, is fulfilling a divine function. He has a purpose in life, whether he's worshiping or not. The second reason is istikhlaf. Now istikhlaf has a couple of different meanings, but one of them is, I'm taking this from the great ethicist Raghib al-Isfahani. He was also a mufassir of Quran, one of the teachers through books of Imam al-Ghazali. Raghib al-Isfahani in Dari'a ila Makarim al-Sharia says that the second reason that Allah created human beings was for istikhlaf, that they actually are replacements for the previous generation. So as a new generation comes, they replace the previous generation. When you look at your children, you're seeing your replacements. They're going to take your place one day, because you will die and they will fulfill that function that you were fulfilling before. That's one of the meanings. Another meaning is to act as a steward. Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa. I'm placing in the earth a caliph. So Allah gives us these tools. He gives us the means that we need to fulfill this function, to be khulafa in the earth. And when Dawood was told that he was being made a caliph, Allah told him to judge with justice and not follow his hawa, because this is what will divert you from justice. So this is the second purpose that we are created. The third purpose that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us is that we are here to adore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to know our Creator. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He said that مَا خَلَقْتُ الْإِنسَ وَالْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, I only created the sprites and the spirits and the humans to worship. Ibn Abbas said, لِيَعْرِفُونَ, in order to know me. So the ibadah comes out of knowledge. You have to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, the way that we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, according to our ulama, is through the aql. It's actually through the intellect. It's not through naql, which is revelation. The way that we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Know, have ilm, that there is no God except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the ulama derive different proofs for this. Burhan al-Tamanu', Burhan al-Tawarid. For people that have studied some aqidah, they know these proofs. They looked at different proofs. The intellect can arrive at an understanding through thought that you have to have a creator. Nothing can come out of nothing. You cannot get something from nothing. There has to be a source behind this. Which my 15-year-old was studying biology, and his teacher was an atheist. And he came and told me that he was studying biology, and he said that his teacher said that we can explain life without God. And I said that biologists should not interfere with cosmology. A biologist should stay in biology and not start talking about cosmology, because that's another science, cosmology. And it reminded me of the joke about the biologists that meet God, and God asked them what they're up to, and they said, well, we've gotten rid of you. And God asked the biologists, how did you get rid of me? And they said, well, we can explain how we got here without you. And he said, well, how would you do that? They said, well, first we take some cosmic dust. And God says, no, wait a second, get your own dust. Right? You see, because Where did it all start? Where did we come from? Even if evolution explained how we have evolved as a species, it doesn't explain where the original material came from. Man cannot bring anything into existence from nothing. He makes organs from already existing cells. The cloning comes from already existing cells. He's now in stem cell research and doing all of these things. Everything that he makes has pre-existing materials. We cannot make anything out of nothing. It's impossible for humans to do that because nothing comes from nothing. And this is why my own teacher said, كَذَبَ الْمُلْحِدُونَ. The atheists are liars. الْعَدْمُ لَا يُوجِدُ الْوُجُودِ. Non-existence cannot bring existence. الْفَوْضَى لَا يُكَوِّنُ النِّظَامِ. Anarchy or chaos cannot bring order into existence. الْجَهِلُ لَا يَلِدُ الْعِلْمِ. Ignorance cannot bring knowledge into existence. And then he said, إِنَّمَا هِيَ انْتِكَاسُ عَقْلِيٍّ كَمَنْ يَمْشِي عَلَى رَأْسِهِ وَرِجْلَاهُ فِي الْهَوَىٰ. This is the inversion, this is an intellectual inversion of reality, like somebody who's walking on his head and his feet are in the air. That this is something that humans have never believed. And this argument now of the modern atheists, this is an ancient argument. Atheists have always been around. In fact, atheists were actually more sophisticated 100 years ago than they are today. And this is the truth, because 100 years ago they were well versed in philology, like Nietzsche. They were well versed in, they were profound philosophers. Even at the time of Socrates, there were atheists. People forget that Marx, who was an atheist, he did his PhD dissertation was on the materialists, the Greek materialists. So he had studied materialistic philosophy. So this argument, this modern argument, is not a new argument. It's a very old argument, and our scholars dealt with this argument extensively, but people don't read their books anymore. And one of the simplistic views of some of these modern Muslims that deny theology and the tradition of theology, they have no response to these new atheists. They have no response other than to say kuffar. But this is not enough, because Muslims have always dealt with these things intellectually in a tradition called Radd al-Shubuhat, which is refutation of the obfuscations that are brought out by the atheists. So it's important for us to remember that we were created to adore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but to know Him through ma'rifah, and this is through the intellect, first and foremost. And our intellect is a spiritual concept. The intellect is immaterial. It's not of this world. And this is why we don't know where we go when we dream, but we know that we leave this place and we enter into another realm, because we're in a realm that's immaterial. So this is important for us to remember.